Boy, we do have a Vegas story for you. This is a wild one. It does happen in sports betting from time to time where a sportsbook will make a mistake. In fact, I've witnessed it firsthand myself. I've taken advantage of it firsthand myself. In 20 years in Vegas, it's happened to me twice where I saw that a book put up a game and the game had already started and I was able to bet at halftime for the entire game. I've done that a couple times. I won both bets. Nobody said anything otherwise. Well, it happened at MGM Sportsbook. Remember, we've had this Korean baseball, and a lot of these games start in the middle of the night. Well, they thought the game started, I think, at 3 a.m., and the game actually started at 1 a.m., and they were already in the fifth inning, and a lot of bettors took advantage of that. Some of whom were able to cash in on their bets if they cashed them in within a 24-hour span or so before they figured it out. But there's a couple $100,000 out there that the book will not have to pay according to the Nevada Gaming Control Board, which I think is ridiculous and it's absurd. I would sue the hell out of the book. So the guy joining us on the line right now, his name is Mac VerStandig, and he is a prominent Las Vegas-based gaming attorney, so we're going to get his expertise on this. Mac, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Thanks, Mac.
I'm well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Sure.
Absolutely.
So when you hear about this story, I guess, I tried to describe it in like 10 seconds. Maybe you could give us a little more specifics on it, and then tell us why you think the Gaming Control Board decided the way they did.
Yeah, so this is like the perfect COVID storm where all of the bizarre oddities that have dominated our lives for the past 4 months came into play at once. We've got Korean baseball, which no one in their right mind would have been wagering on a year ago, that is suddenly the predominant wagering opportunity in sports books. We've got sports books that are understaffed because of COVID layoffs. We've got sports books taking significant overnight action because of the Korean time difference. And we've got gamblers hyper-focusing on these events because there's nothing else out there. So it's exactly what you described. There were a handful of bettors who figured out that the Korean lines weren't coming off the board when the game started, and they managed to get in some exotic parlays that turned $100 into six figures. Some did it at kiosks. At least one person did it on an app. Some of them managed to get cashed out before anyone realized what was going on. Some didn't, but the Nevada Gaming Control Board came in the other day and said it doesn't much matter. MGM's not going to have to honor these wagers, which is a completely heartbreaking outcome.
I don't understand. Mac, as a gaming attorney, correct me if I'm wrong here, I've seen this happen before where the book manager will say, look, we'll cash your ticket, but we have the right to tell you not to come back here. And that happened to me, by the way, in one book, and I said, fine, no problem, just pay me. How can the gaming board decide this way? Clearly, it was a mistake by the book. If they allow the customer to bet on it, isn't it the casino's fault? See, to me, it's just like a card counter. There's nothing illegal about card counting. Now, a casino could ask you to leave. They don't want to take your action. That's fine. But if they allow a card counter to sit there and the guy's up $5,000, they can't ask for that money back. It's their fault because they didn't tag this guy as a card counter and ask him to leave. To me, it's the same thing.
So, look, I agree with you 100%. I'm not going to argue the other side, but I'll tell you where the issue is coming from. One, that's somewhat unique to Nevada. In New Jersey, there's actually a pretty clearly posted rule that says a pass post is void. But that sort of supports this idea that since Nevada doesn't have that rule, a pass post should play here. A pass post is when you get your action in after the game has begun. I also think to recreational gamblers, this is immensely unfair because we live in this era of in-game betting. People are used to being able to wager on events once they've started and expecting consumers who aren't savvy bettors to differentiate between those opportunities and just forgot to take something off.
You're talking about in-game wagering, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Is there in-game wagering in the KBO?
Yes, there is.
Oh, wow.
I don't believe there is.
Oh, I thought there was. Okay, maybe I'm wrong.
Okay.
There might be.
Yep.
I can't what every book in town is doing.
I mean, that is next level degeneracy, in my opinion.
That's tough. So sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you, Mac. Keep going with what you were. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, but I mean, the other thing is this. There is this gaming regulation in Nevada that says a book shall not knowingly accept money to ostensibly as a wage upon an event whose outcome has already been determined.
Right.
And I think that actually goes in favor of the bettors here because the games weren't over, right? It's clear that in Nevada, a wager on a game that's already ended is void.
That's different.
But if they don't have a regulation,
the game was still going on. They were still gambling. Yeah, the game was still going on. That's a good point.
Right.
Yeah.
They just happened to get unlucky that the game, I'm sure, was a blowout at that point, and the other team had no chance of winning.
No, it wasn't a blowout. The game was 1-0, if I recall, in the fifth inning. A lot of people did do is bet the under on the first 5 innings.
Oh, okay. All right.
Are you aware of that, Mac? Maybe I'm wrong. My understanding was there were some bets that people made that were almost a sure thing.
There were some because there were parlays. There was a combination of games. Some of the over-under action was almost a sure thing, but there were still outcome wagers in there. And look, this is why we play the night, right? There can be a comeback. None of these games had ended. No one was betting on the 1998 World Series.
Right.
Well, in the Mac, you look at the 10-team parlay that paid out $131,000. I get. I get the single game wagers, but he still had to, or that person still had to win 9 other games. Why would a 9-team parlay not pay out then?
Well, most of the action was in progress, though, right? So most of it was informed by what had happened over the preceding almost 2 hours, which is the Game and Control Board's rationale. But the other point that comes out of this, and you just hinted at it, I don't know that the casino was giving the money back if these guys lost. They were sort of free-rolling them unintentionally. But if you pass post a parlay and it doesn't come home, I promise you're not getting a call from MGM the next day saying, guess what, there's $200 in your account.
Right. Well, yeah, that's kind of like I made a futures wager with Westgate last year on Zach Greinke to win the NL Cy Young. And he was traded to the Astros. He was traded to the AL, which voided my wager, and I didn't get my money back for that.
Right. It's, gaming ultimately decides what wagers are going to be valid and what aren't. A casino's not allowed to cancel a wager without gaming's consent, which is why they went to the Game and Control Board here. But it's still incredibly shoddy in this circumstance. There's no real precedent for it. I'll be curious to see if any of the guys appeal, although the appellate process for a canceled wager is not the most promising of legal avenues.
So, Mac, let me ask you a question. Let's just say, with your expertise, let's just say, for whatever reason, you bet $11,000 on one side or the other. You made a bet, and you learned that it was in the 4th inning that you placed this bet, whether unintentional or not. You win your bet, they don't pay you. Would you take legal action? Do you think you could win in that bet?
So I probably would. I would probably go through the appellate process. Historically, gaming can be friendly to players, especially with smaller action. On the larger bets, there's this perceived tendency that they look out for the casinos, but I think that's perceptive. It's certainly not a different law. But,
Gotcha.
At $11,000, one of the problems is someone like me is going to charge you more than that for the case.
Right, so it's not even worth it.
I would have to be
right. Here's something else, though, that I want to bring up, Mac. A lot of these bettors, or a good portion of them, were able to cash in their tickets. Why is it fair that if some of these people were able to cash in their tickets before MGM knew of the screw-up, why is that these other people who waited can't, and these people who cashed in early were able to get their money? That's not fair either.
I agree it's not fair, but casinos have treated bettors differently since the mob days, right? Card counters get politely asked to leave or sent over to the $5 table. Drunken whales are encouraged to wager more and play additional hands.
Right.
Here, I don't know that it was intentional. And, it seems like some guys were smart, waited for the window to open up, got their money, and presumably got out of town.
God, it just doesn't. It's just such a crazy story. This stuff is going to happen again. It's going to happen again. I feel like I see some of these stories every few years. You hear a story like this one. I think as a whole, we all could agree there's not a lot of people who have sympathy for the books. That's for sure. It's usually for the customers. I'm on their side on this one, Mac.
I'm with you there. And look, I don't have sympathy for the books because my job is representing professional gamblers and recreational gamblers. But this one's egregious. MGM made a mistake. I know the economy's shoddy, but MGM can afford to pay it out. I'm disheartened that they didn't make this into a PR coup take winners' photos with oversized checks, pay these guys out, and then quietly fix the problem. That would have been the right thing to do, but they did not do the right thing.
You're right.
Totally separate question, totally separate conversation, basically, Mac, but entity wagering was passed 5 years ago in Nevada. And a couple years ago, it was just completely shut down. Actually, I started my own entity wagering fund, and I just wanted to get your opinions on why it was shut down and if you think that it is sustainable in the future anywhere in the United States.
So it was shut down in large part because the Securities and Exchange Commission started dropping subpoenas on the operators to find out everything they could about the entities and sort of wreaking havoc on that front. And that made it not economically viable for the operators, right? Like, it was a great idea if it was hassle-free, but if all of a sudden you have this mammoth federal agency pushing you around, it's not really worth the hassle. I think the SEC was out of bounds doing that, and I question their jurisdiction, which is a really boring legal discussion for another day. I would like to see it come back. And, let's be honest, it still happens.
Right.
It's just not declared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? I mean, God knows what percentage of large wagers are placed by runners. Syndicates are the sharps in this town, and it is easier to monitor them and easier, candidly, to make sure taxes get paid if you give them an open and clean process to do it. So I think it works against everyone's interest to have it deterred, but the federal government just couldn't keep its hands off of a good thing.
Well,
tragically, that was the demise.
Isn't that the case with the federal government when it comes to almost anything? Hey, Mac, I appreciate your expertise when it comes to this, man. I thank you. And for the record, I know you think you agree with me. All these customers should get paid, and I hope they do eventually. Mac VerStandig, thank you so much for taking some time to join us. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. Be good.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Mac.
That's gaming attorney Mac VerStandig. Very smart when it comes to this stuff. And as I said before, and I'll say it again, I'm on the side of the customers. If somebody in the book or the casino makes a mistake, pay out the customer. I felt the same way when it came to Phil Ivey and the situation with the cards there as well.
When we were with Westgate and they put up odds for a couple of different events, and it was the Open, and we thought it was the British Open. And
don't even get me started with Westgate.
And we made a couple of wagers on that, and we didn't get our money back, even though it was an honest mistake by us. We thought that we were betting on something that we didn't know what we were betting on, and I believe that collectively between us, we lost, $1,700 on that?
All I know is this. The way that some books do business is disgusting. I am going to put Westgate into that category. I don't care if Jay Cornegate doesn't like it or not. There have been specific instances where I have been treated unfairly in that book. They do some very shady things there. I love the Westgate as a whole. I love that property. I have a lot of friends there, and I've enjoyed going to the restaurants there. Some of the people, not all of them, some of the people that manage that sportsbook at the Westgate are a disgrace, and I have no problem in saying that aloud. There are some great books in town. I will never place a bet at the Westgate Sportsbook again.
Well, if the casino or if the book can make a mistake, then the customer has to be able to make a mistake. It has to be both ways.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.